Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Mikey. You guys are rocking with me on Mikey's Intellectual Corner. On today's episode, we're going to be diving back into our Muslim expansion series with the, I believe, the conquest of Northern Africa and Alexandria. We'll see. With that being said, don't forget to check out my short series, Today in History. With that, let's go and get right into it, guys.
Even before recorded history began in the region, Egypt had a close relationship with its sub-Saharan neighbour to the south, Nubia, and they were about to be the next targets of the Caliphate's ambitions. When the Muslims finally managed to crack the Roman Babylon fortress, it unlocked the gate to the remainder of Egypt, so Emperor Heraclius prepared to continue his desperate defence of Egypt at the second city of his empire, Alexandria. Welcome to our video continuing the Islamic invasions of the 7th century, the Siege of Alexandria, and the campaign against Nubia.
Honestly, I feel like, so I'm pretty sure this is where we left off, where they just got finished conquering, I believe, Babylon and Heliopolis, the one word that I cannot freaking say for the life of me. And from there, they were thinking about going deeper into Alexandria, but wasn't sure quite yet. So yeah, with that being said, let's go and get into it, guys.
After the fall of Babylon to Rashidun forces in December 640, Amr ibn Alas kept his army stationed in the area for a while, dispatching word to Caliph Umar of his triumph and requesting permission to continue the conquest towards Alexandria. This pause also gave his army a much-needed rest. In Constantinople, the elderly and sickly Emperor Heraclius reacted to the latest Muslim victory by ferrying several thousand more imperial reinforcements to Egypt over the Mediterranean. They had clear orders: protect Alexandria at all costs. Upon making landfall at the provincial capital, these reinforcements and the existing Alexandrian garrison, possibly under Theodorus's command, began working to strengthen the city fortifications and fanning out to defensible positions en route to the city. Reports of these preparations made it south to Amr. At about the
I wonder why they didn't fortify the other surrounding cities that obviously fell so easily to the the Arab conquest and all that. I'm kind of curious as to why. I mean, obviously we know why they only did that for Alexandria, but why not the rest?
Reports of these preparations made it south to Amr. At about the same time, a messenger arrived from Arabia with the Caliph's order to advance and seize Alexandria. So, leaving a small garrison to hold down Babylon and keep the Memphis region in check, Amr gave orders for his men to break camp. The 12,000-strong Muslim army headed northwards in February 641. Marching along the Nile Delta's western fringe, immediately adjacent to a familiar desert climate, the Muslims overcame light Roman resistance at Tanut and Qaum Sharik before turning northwest away from the river. After subsequently capturing Saltaeus, Amr then won a bloody victory at Kion.
I wonder why they also, why the Byzantines didn't just go along the other civilizations that are like maybe further east, or not east, but further west, down, more closer towards the Atlantic to help out. Because, obviously the conquest was coming towards them too, so why not get them to help out too, Maybe they did and they just, got squished, but you never know.
And a bloody victory at Kion, just 12 miles away from Alexandria, and chased the defeated Roman forces to the city's eastern approach. The march to the sea had taken just 22 days. Alexandria had been built by Alexander the Great and his Ptolemaic successors on a relatively narrow strip of land, bounded to the north by the Mediterranean Sea and in the south by Lake Mayotte. Since the main transportation routes ended east of the city, the only truly vulnerable approach was the northeastern one.
Kind of reminds you of Constantinople, how that was set up and how grand it was and stuff like that, and all of its seaports and how impenetrable it is. But yeah, you can tell a lot of people are about to die right now. Yeah, let's go and get into it though, guys.
The Muslims made camp outside weapon range and then deployed for battle, slowly advancing towards the recently reinforced Alexandrian walls. Unfortunately for Amr, such a careless preliminary move allowed the expert Roman artillerists to disrupt and scatter his units with volley after volley of massive catapult stones. This bombardment sent Amr and his warriors back to camp, dodging missiles all the way.
I'm surprised they even did that, because like they know better, because they've always had to deal with that, you know what I'm saying, in every single siege they've dealt with. So why give them the opportunity that you know that is going to come anyway? Get back into it.
Amr and his warriors back to camp, dodging missiles all the way. Such attacks continued with intermissions, and in these intermissions, the Roman defenders would instead launch sorties out of the city and attack the Muslim army, aiming to throw it back and end the siege. Despite the ferocity and competence of the men carrying them out, these attempts failed consistently and ended up being pushed back into the city. At some point during the first months of indecisive action, the defenders sortied out against a section of the front manned by the Arabian.
At this point, it almost seems like the Muslim forces are better trained than the Roman forces, the Eastern Roman forces, which is crazy because they're Roman, and you know they have this huge tradition. When you think of Roman, you think of the military, but they're getting literally like pushed back like it's nothing. You know, it's crazy.
Defenders sortied out against a section of the front manned by the Arabian Mara tribe, and a fierce clash began. It seemed to have concluded as an indecisive draw, but the Mara lost a man whose head was subsequently cut off and taken away by the Romans, much to the Arabs' fury.
You know, disrespectful that is. That is like, could you imagine being in battle with your best friend or something, and then next thing you know, his head's gone, and you see it in being driven away? And you know you can't even bury him now with his head. Like, you know how disrespectful that is? Damn.
Away by the Romans, much to the Arabs' fury. The next morning, the same thing happened. A Roman officer, probably made confident by the previous day's action, launched an attack on the Mara, but this time the outcome was very different. After being killed in the fighting, his head was taken by the Arab warriors and used as a bargaining chip to get their comrade's head back. After a brief negotiation, both sides made an exchange and buried their kinsman with honors.
That's actually really sad, to be honest with you, but it's karma, though, you know, on the Byzantine commanders on the side, you know what I'm saying? That's straight instant karma, but it is pretty sad when you think about it, though. Just the disrespect, anyway, you know?
And buried their kinsman with honors. At the height of summer, around 2 months after Amr initially constructed his camp, the Sami tribal commander decided to shift it forwards for reasons which we are not aware of. However, as his forces were moving, the Roman defenders sensed an opportunity and mounted a daring cavalry attack, which nevertheless was easily repulsed. A reckless Muslim cavalry detachment set out in hot pursuit of the fleeing Romans, and actually got inside the city just before the defenders could close the gates behind them. Heavily outnumbered, they fought a fierce skirmish at the so-called Church of Gold, in which some of them were killed and the rest were pushed out of Alexandria.
Yeah, they're really lucky that they didn't get locked in and get freaking bombarded with arrows and pretty much anything else that the Byzantines could get their hands on, especially how they had the catapults right there at the gates. Like, they're really lucky, honestly.
Some of them were killed, and the rest were pushed out of Alexandria. Heraclius, who maintained constant contact with Alexandria, was all too aware that the Muslims were gaining momentum. Worried that all of Egypt was about to be lost, he gathered a formidable army across what remained of the empire, together with equipment and supplies. Just before this giant emperor-led relief armada was about to set sail, Heraclius died in Constantinople at the age of 66. leaving his eldest sons, Constantine III and Heraclius, as joint heirs. This initiated a round of imperial politicking which didn't allow the empire to react at the worst possible moment. As senior emperor, Constantine attempted to get...
So on top of, you gotta think of this, so on top of a plague, the previous Sassanid War that just happened like, what, not even 20, 30, 40 years prior to this, and then now you have the death of a king and, you know, bad politics and a whole bunch of craziness. And as we can see why it was so easy for this conquest to take place, you know what I'm saying? Let's get back into it though.
Possible moment. As senior emperor, Constantine attempted to get a hold of the increasingly dire situation in Egypt. His untimely death only a short time later derailed those plans entirely. If that wasn't bad enough, some Byzantine generals, including one Valentinus, took up arms in support of Constantine's son, Constans II, believing that Heraclius' mother, Martina, had poisoned Constantine.
So now, not only on top of everything that I just listed, you also have civil war on top of it, all that. So it's like, you know what I'm saying, was that really the best time for that type of crap to happen, you know what I'm saying? So we can just see why it was so easy, pretty much is what I'm saying to you. Let's get back to it though, guys.
Had poisoned Constantine. This dynastic struggle would not conclude until late 641, ensuring that no reinforcements would be sent to Alexandria. Politicking also infected the soldiers defending the Egyptian capital, causing infighting and massive morale loss. When the siege had dragged into its 6th month with no sign of ending, Amma received a letter from the Caliph chastising him for taking so long. So, after conferring with his generals, Amma selected the experienced Ubadah bin as-Samit to lead an assault. In late October 641,
well, in regards of it taking so long, I feel like, you know, you gotta think of it too. They're right on the sea, and the Arabs don't have, like, I'm pretty sure at this point they don't have a navy, so obviously they're able to, the Byzantines are still able, obviously not soldiers, but they're still able to get, like, you know, supplies, like maybe food and stuff like that, if I'm not mistaken, so they can still hold out, so you can see why it might have taken so long.
After conferring with his generals, Amma selected the experienced Ubadah bin as-Samit to lead an assault. In late October 641, the entire Muslim army assembled for midday prayer and then deployed for battle. Then, led by Ubadah, Amma's forces finally captured Alexandria by storming a gate near the Church of Gold. Of Muslim achievements to this point, 20 years since Hijrah, the seizure of Alexandria ranked alongside events such as Yarmouk and Al-Qadisiyah in its importance. The Caliphate acquired an invaluable naval base while diminishing Roman sea power, and conquered a land of immense riches and culture. Perhaps most importantly for the future, possession of Egypt allowed the Islamic armies to penetrate even further south and west into Africa. The wealth, beauty, and luxury of...
And, you know, not to mention the fact that this would mark the point where, you know, these lands would forever undergo, you know, important religious changes, essentially, for the rest of time, which is really important when you think about it, you know what I'm saying? But let's get back into it, though, guys.
Into Africa. The wealth, beauty, and luxury of Alexandria ensnared the Arabs and their general in equal measure. But Amma could not make his headquarters there without the Caliph's permission. So he sent an emissary back to Medina, asking Umar whether or not he could stay in the metropolis. Unfortunately for the conqueror of Egypt, one of the Rashidun ruler's many quirks was the absolute contempt and distrust in which he held large expanses of water, such as the Nile. The single occasion on which Umar allowed one of his commanders, a governor of Damascus known as Muawiyah, to embark on a naval operation, the entire force had been destroyed. So Umar refused Amma's request, explaining, "I do not wish the Muslims to take up their abode where water intervenes between them and me in winter or summer."
I'm sure, the general wanted to, or was thinking to himself, these waterways can be used for very important strategic points in later conquests and really even sources of trade and stuff like that with other neighboring civilizations and stuff like that. But I guess, the Caliph was just too stuck in his ways, so let's get back.
Or summer. Disappointed, Amr moved south and laid the foundations for his new city, the first capital of Islamic Egypt, Misr al-Fustat, the city of the tents, or Fustat for short. The country's new governor was occupied for the next few months attending to the administration of the Caliphate's newest territory. As 641 gave way to 642, Amr settled grievances among his warriors and the locals, revitalized previous...
It's crazy too. I feel like the Byzantine cities off to the west over there aren't doing really anything to, prepare for what's, about to come to them. They're probably just, living life. And it's kind of crazy to think about. Maybe they are. I don't know. But we're about to find out, I guess,
Settled grievances among his warriors and the locals, revitalized previously abandoned pieces of infrastructure, including canals, and even dispatched food aid to famine-ridden Medina at Umar's request. To extinguish any remaining embers of resistance against Muslim rule, Amr sent out 3 columns to the areas around Damietta, Heliopolis, and Fayum, while a 4th ensured that the remainder of Lower Egypt was obedient. All of them had an easy time, accomplishing their task without bloodshed by mid-642.
Well, you gotta understand too, with the jizya, it's not that hard of a decision, what I'm saying? Let's just pay this little cheap tax and keep it moving. What I'm saying? Instead of getting killed or having to convert, why not? And obviously we can see a lot of them converted anyway, so.
Accomplishing their task without bloodshed by mid-642. With Egypt firmly in his grip, the adventurous Amr ibn Alas turned his focus towards a Christianized Nubian kingdom called Mercuria to the south. Mercuria, ruled by a king called Kalidurit from his great citadel at Dongola, was a rising and expansionist power in sub-Saharan Africa. In fact, its monarch had only recently annexed a former regional rival, Nobatia. A literate society with a vibrant culture of their own, the Nubians were renowned as hardy, ferocious warriors. In particular, their formidable reputation for horsemanship and archery was known around the Mediterranean world.
Yeah. So I know, real quick too, as a fun fact, the Egyptian hieroglyphs are actually originated from the Nubians. I'm pretty sure that it was an actual common form of language and I guess way of writing and stuff like that in their civilization. But as it went to the Egyptians, it was maintained and reserved mainly for the higher ups and the priests and stuff like that, who could only really decipher it and stuff like that. If I'm not mistaken. And on top of that, as he said, they were renowned for their archers and their horseback riding and stuff like that. I do know that they were also recruited a lot for all around the Mediterranean, for especially around Egypt, for their battle skills and different conquests and stuff like that. But just a real quick fun fact about Nubia. All right, let's get back into it, though, guys.
For horsemanship and archery was known around the Mediterranean world. At some point during the scorching African summer of 642, Amr sent his cousin Uqba bin Nafa and 20,000 horsemen into Nubia, where they quickly began suffering at the hands of the local inhabitants. Unable to resist the Muslims in a pitched battle, lethal but unarmored Mercurian archers, mounted and on foot, launched constant hit-and-run attacks which gradually sapped Uqba's strength before darting back unharmed into the wilderness. As the Islamic army pushed deeper into Nubia and encountered guerrilla-style attacks in increasing numbers and ferocity, the hawk-eyed Mercurian archers would frequently call out to the Arab invaders, "Where would you like me to put an arrow in you?" When one of the Muslim warriors skeptically pointed at an area of their body, our sources state that an arrow would indeed strike there, injuring or killing the man in question. When Uqba and his diminished forces finally...
Well, obviously we can see how great the skills of the Nubian archers really were. But you know, that guerrilla style warfare always gets the main opponent like that. You know, I mean, think about it: Napoleon, Spain, USA with Vietnam, Russia with the Afghanistan, stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? Like that guerrilla style warfare always like outguns the opponent usually. You know what I'm saying? We should get back into it.
In question. When Uqba and his diminished forces finally neared the Makurian capital at Dongola, they found a smaller enemy army of around 10,000 waiting for them, forced into defending their central city by Uqba's movements. Eager to destroy the Nubians' fighting potential now that he had them all in one place, Amr's cousin began arraying his troops for battle. As the Muslim advance towards Kalidurat's line began, it was almost instantaneously hit by an utterly merciless barrage of Makurian arrows that struck the attacking army with pinpoint accuracy.
I think if there's one thing that the Muslim forces' weak point is the fact that those arrows, if they can't get close to you, you're pretty much good. And I think that's been seen in many sieges, and I guess we're seeing it now too. Let's get back into it though.
That struck the attacking army with pinpoint accuracy. Uqba's assault was stalled in its tracks by the hail of missiles just as soon as it began, and his soldiers, 250 of whom had lost at least one eye in the battle, suffered terribly. Unable to close with the Nubian archers and swiftly losing men to grievous injury, Uqba withdrew his warriors from the field. Forever after, Muslims would call the Nubians the Archers of the Eye, because of their penchant for loosing arrows with deadly accuracy into the eyes of their enemies. Unwilling to continue such a difficult campaign in a land which promised them little gain from plunder or future land.
Boy, if the Nubian warrior and kingdom as a whole isn't like just underrated and covered in, just, in history as a whole, period. Like, it's just not covered enough. And that's like, what I'm saying? Why is it that Eastern Roman Empire is more covered than this, but this is like, what I'm saying? I don't know. It's really awe-inspiring when you really see that. And this isn't the only African kingdom out there that was doing crazy stuff like this. You know what I'm saying? You had the Mali Empire, the Ghana Empire, Axum. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, let's get back into it though, guys.
Little gain from plunder or future land, the Muslims continued retreating all the way back to Fustat. Although not exactly a decisive defeat, an army of the Caliphate had been defeated for one of the first times in history. After a month or two of recuperation, Amr assembled his armies from their bivouacs and personally led them west into the desert during September of 642. After a month of hard marching, the Muslims eventually arrived at a still Roman city known as Barca, which, having no arrangements for defense, quickly surrendered. This was the first act of the decades-long Islamic conquest of a region which is now called the Maghreb.
That's crazy. It's crazy how easy the Byzantine cities are just giving up like that. I mean, like, only a decade to cover a landmass as massive as northern Africa, you know what I'm saying? That's crazy to think about. But yeah, let's get back into it though, guys.
The region which is now called the Maghreb. Amr had Uqba ride inland from the coast, where he successfully pacified the area of arid desert between Barca and Sawila without violence. The poor population quickly proved law-abiding and reliable in their payment of taxes, so Amr decreed that part of the revenues coming in from the entire Fezzan region would be spent to alleviate poverty there.
See, that's just great politicking, and honestly, it's kind of sad to see like they had to take until the Muslims to get there for that to happen when the Byzantines and the Romans and all that owned that land for so long, you know what I'm saying? So I guess they just stopped caring
Alleviate poverty there. Then in spring 643, the Muslim army advanced on and blockaded the Roman garrisoned city of Tripoli. Amr set up his camp on an elevated section of terrain east of the city and waited, realizing that such a coastal settlement could be navally resupplied for an extended period of time. Lacking siege weapons, he also lacked the ability to reduce fortifications. After 2 months of relative inactivity, 8 of Amr's warriors galloped off west of the city for a hunting trip. When these hunters began making their way back around noon, the sheer heat of the day led them to ride back along the coast. All of a sudden, they came upon Tripoli's western boundary, where the city wall met the sea, and discovered that the section was only thinly protected. In a display of bravery or foolishness, these 8 intrepid opportunists used Tripoli's vulnerable flank to infiltrate their way inside the city. Before the defenders even realized what was happening, the Muslim group reached the city.
No, the soldiers who were supposed to be there were either asleep or using the bathroom, because how do you leave your weakest point in your city that you're obviously at siege from bare? Like, that doesn't make sense. Something had to have given, you know what I'm saying? I don't know.
Realized what was happening, the Muslim group reached the city center and began slaying enemies. Such unexpected violence triggered a bout of extreme panic within the city, both among the civilians and Tripoli's defending forces. In fact, a large number of the armed soldiers within the city believed that a large enemy contingent had somehow gotten inside, and because of this, took refuge aboard a number of anchored ships in the harbor. Amr caught wind of the pandemonium taking place inside the city, and so quickly set about exploiting the weakness. Arraying his warriors with haste, the Arab commander ordered a full-scale assault to scale Tripoli's enfeebled walls. In yet another action of which we have left no detail, the Muslims managed to get inside and joined their 8-strong vanguard. Unwilling to fight any further, the Roman defenders took whatever they could carry and departed aboard their ships, leaving Tripoli to Amr's army.
You know what's crazy? Those 8 men who probably only recognition, probably didn't receiving, like payment or obviously anything like that. But I feel like at least they deserve at least, military advancement, like right under John or something. Like, that's crazy. Because I feel like they're not even going to say anything about this. Let's see if they do.
Leaving Tripoli to Amr's army. While most of the army stayed in the city for a while, the conqueror of Egypt sent a swift detachment of cavalry about 40 miles to the west, where the population of a town known as Sabrata was still carefree. They had heard rumors of fighting for neighboring cities, but it would be a while before the war reached them, if ever. The next morning, Sabrata's Roman guards opened the gates of their city, and its population began leading animals out to graze for the day. Unfortunately for them, it was at this moment that the Islamic cavalry unit struck completely by surprise, getting through the gates, killing the majority of the defending troops, and sacking the town. With that done, they returned to Tripoli.
See, at this point, they're just using all the cheat codes. Like, how is it such a breakdown in communication with the Byzantines that they don't even know that, hey, you should probably be on the lookout instead of just letting yourself graze and not, really paying attention? That's crazy. Let's get back into it, guys.
The town. With that done, they returned to Tripoli. Having succeeded, Amr longed for more, and eagerly penned another letter to Caliph Umar containing both the good news of victory and a request to continue his conquest. This was rejected, as the Caliph was worried about overextending his forces. And this time, there was no loophole or clever ploy that Amr could use to bypass Umar's decree and continue his relentless campaigning. Therefore, after allowing his army to recuperate in Tripoli for a time, Amr travelled back to Fustat and remained there, quietly administering his Egyptian domain and dealing with whispers of future rebellion. Although Umar had spared...
I mean, you can't argue with worrying about overextending, especially with such a small force that the Muslims had. They were only not barely even in the 100,000s strong at this point, unless they can start, recruiting or conscripting, at least,
with whispers of future rebellion. Although Umar had spared the rest of Byzantine Africa for the time being, that wouldn't last long. However, as the combat in North Africa was winding down, the situation on the Persian front was becoming heated again. In the next episode, we will return to the Muslim-Sassanid War, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button. Please consider liking, commenting, and...
Alright guys, we're going to stop right there. So as we see, sorry, got caught in my ear. So as we see, the conquest of Northern Africa is just really, it's crazy, but it's really easy. 10 years to conquer that entire landmass. And, big shout out to the Nubian Empire. I really want to do more videos on a lot more African empires and stuff like that. I think they're really underrated and, underappreciated, especially in Western history. But with that being said, thank you guys again for joining me on another episode of Micah's Intellectual Corner. Please check out my short series Today in History. I'll see you guys when I see you. I'm out. Peace!